Howdy howdy, my name is John, and this video is a review of the book The Sibling Society by Robert Bly. Robert Bly is best known for writing the book Iron John. You do not need to have read Iron John before you read this book. I'm going to go ahead and give my rating for this book first before I start to discuss it. This book is a 4-star read. I think it's widely available to both men and women and people of all ages. If you decide to read this book, one tip I would give you is there are not traditional footnotes in this book. However, there are notes at the end of the book. What I would suggest you do is read a chapter and then go to the end of the book and then read the notes of the chapter and kind of alternate between the chapters and the notes. That way the chapter will be fresh in your mind as you're reading the notes. So what does Robert Bly mean by the Sibling Society? What he's referring to here is the tendency of people in our day and age to look to the people of their own age and form their ideas and opinions. There's not really a whole lot of people kind of looking toward older people or really even a focus on younger people. And what Bly accuses us of doing is all of us becoming half adults. We don't really grow up into full adulthood. Because there are no full adults, younger children have to kind of grow up in a hurry. And while they don't reach full adulthood, they're still more mature than their years. Bly does discuss some of the reasons why we now have a sibling society, and he places much of the blame on the media. It seems like each generation now has its own books, its own taste in movies, and its own taste in music. Bly also blames the poor decisions of political and business leaders. This poor leadership caused younger people to distrust older people. One thing he really doesn't talk about is the change in technology. It's easy to assume that older people don't know anything because of how quickly technology changes. One example that I think speaks to Generation X is the blinking 12 o'clock light on a VCR. People older than myself did not know how to fix the blinking 12 o'clock on a VCR, and they never really wanted to take the time to learn. It's a skill that millennials and younger don't need to know because really we don't use VCRs anymore, and our electronic devices usually have the ability to set the clock themselves. First, let's talk with a couple of the weaknesses of this book. The first weakness I want to talk about is while Bly is critical of both the left and the right, he makes it very clear what his own political beliefs are. And I think there are times when he doesn't necessarily let the facts get in his way. I do suggest you to fact check the details of this book a little bit. The second weakness is the fact that this book was written in 1996 and is a little bit dated in its references. I'm recording this review in August of 2020, and currently Robert Bly is 93 years old. This book is mostly about Generation X, who by and large were in their 20s when this book was written. There's a few that were in their early 30s and a few in their late teens. And while the outcome is still very much the same, Generation X grew up in very different circumstances than millennials did. For one, most of us really didn't encounter the internet until we were already in our 20s. The World Wide Web was just invented maybe three or 4 years before this book was even written. and we didn't have social media back in our day. I think Generation X will get the most out of this book because we have the benefit of looking back on the nearly 25 years that since this book was written, and we can see how our society has changed over that time. I still think millennials will get a lot out of reading this book because the effects of the sibling society are far more savage today than they were when this book was written. Now I would like to discuss a couple of the strengths of the book. Like Iron John, Bly uses fairy tales to illustrate how the sibling society affects our own lives. Bly primarily uses the story of Jack and the Beanstalk to illustrate these effects. I should note that Bly is using an older version of the Jack and the Beanstalk story, and the version that you grew up with as a child has omissions from the story that Bly uses. The second strength are the two chapters that go into detail how the sibling society affects both boys and girls. We tend to grow up in a fatherless society now, and not having a father around when a child is about 2 to 3 affects both boys and girls very deeply. It affects them both very differently because boys and girls relate to their father differently. But it takes away the father at a moment when they really need to learn how to bond with men. Finally, by using other stories, Bly shows how healing in the mythological world can bring healing in the real world. We don't have to let the circumstances of our upbringing to determine our futures. So what solution does Bly offer us to combat the sibling society? Well, he advises us that all of us must choose to become true adults. That means taking responsibility for our own actions, but it also means seeking to connect with both those that are older than us, the elders, and those that are younger than us. Because as he details in this book, the sibling society does the most damage to those that are younger than us. I was fortunate enough to read Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom after I read this book, and I think the two make a good companion. That book demonstrates how to connect with elders and the life lessons that they can teach us. I highly recommend that everyone read this book. It does have its flaws, which is why I didn't give it a 5-star rating, but it does have a lot that it can teach us. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.